Woods, Part 3, by Chris Crawford. When I awoke, the campers were still screaming. Their blood-curdling shrills pierced my ears and filled the night air. My eyes adjusted to the darkness as something landed with a heavy thud and rolled across the leaves towards my face. As it settled to a stop, I realized what it was.
"His eyes are still open, man!"
The blonde kid exclaimed with terrified excitement and a cracked voice as the girls wailed in a cacophony of fear over his cry. The sheer look of terror was frozen on the officer's lifeless, disembodied face. They were in shock, and their minds were trying to reason with what they had just witnessed, unaware of the multifarious horrors still yet to come. "The keys! The keys! Where are the keys?" I shouted. The brown-haired kid slowly pointed towards the canopy of the trees in terrified awe, his mouth agape, but too frightened to make a sound. I looked up to see the rest of the officer's body, dancing in the trees like a twisted marionette as it swayed in the wind.
"Who are you, and what was that thing?"
The blonde directed his attention to me, grasping for clues to make any sense of what was happening. I've been here before. Those disappearances, that was my girlfriend and her friends. I was with those two cops when they went missing, but they aren't missing. I saw their bodies, just like that one, I told them as I pointed to the officer's body. The blonde kid fell to his knees. Shaken further by my story, he looked up with teary eyes and said,
"Are we gonna die?"
"I don't know, and I don't know what that thing is. But it's not alone. There's at least a dozen of them, maybe more. I've escaped once, and I'm your best chance to stay alive. But you've got to help me out of these cuffs." They agreed and told me their names were Chad, the blonde, Doug, Ashley, and Renee, the redhead. As Chad climbed the closest tree to try and reach the keys still hanging from the belt of the officer, Renee asked me why I had come back. I explained the voicemails from Amy and how they ruined my attempt to sneak back into the woods. After a moment, she said, "You came out here to die, didn't you?" "Maybe I did," I sighed, forebodingly. The keys clambered to the ground from the trees as Chad yelled down that he was going for the other gun on the officer's opposite hip. Before he could finish the sentence, though, the branch gave way, and he and the officer's body came crashing down to the forest floor. I wrestled with the keys and freed myself from the cuffs before rushing over to see how bad the damage was. I pushed through the other three standing over Chad. His arm was broken. The bone was jutting through his skin just below the elbow. He was trying to gasp for air and yell out at the same time. He had knocked the wind out of himself, and he was in shock. After bandaging his arm the best we could, with his shirt and collecting the second gun, we started to move. I gave the other gun to Doug as we moved through the trees. "Shh, did you hear that?" Ashley whispered. I listened over the howling of the trees and heard static, almost like interference from an old television, and it was getting louder. "Guys, we have a problem," Chad said fearfully as he grabbed my shoulder and swung me around and pointed. There were beady red eyes off in the distance, at least 100 of them. Bloodthirsty, stalking us. It wasn't static we were hearing. It was breathing. Immediately, the girl started running wildly and screaming. This wasn't a hunt to those things. It was a game, and we were the pawns. We followed suit behind the girls, but I was at a loss. We were moving too fast for me to formulate any sort of plan, and those things, they were right behind us and gaining. We weren't getting anywhere, and I didn't even know if we were headed in the right direction anymore. I had one of the guns, so I brought up the rear. If push came to shove, I could at least buy them some time, even if only for a few seconds. I could feel the hot breath on the back of my neck as one of them matched my speed. It could have taken me down easily by now. This was it, my one shot to turn around and let off a few rounds before it was over. I planted my feet firmly, and in one swift, fluid motion spun around with the gun drawn, but it was for nothing. I felt the force of a dump truck hit my right side, and it sent me hurtling through the air like a rag doll. Time had almost stopped though as I flew through the air, like I was in slow motion, and I finally saw one of them, only because it had gotten Doug. I watched it tear through his flesh like butter as I spiraled back down to the earth, breaking every branch and limb on the way down. For a brief moment, I felt the soft embrace of a bush catch me as I landed, and then the bush disappeared. I was still falling through the ground. I have never felt more pain in my life than when I finally hit land. Every nerve in my body was screaming in protest. I was sure that I was crippled at this point, while my lungs retched for air. I had fallen at least 20 feet with the branches slowing my fall, and maybe another 15 feet into the cavern below. I forced myself to push the pain down long enough to regroup myself. I had broken at least 2 ribs, and blood trickled down my arm and leg from scratches I had sustained during the fall. I sat up and looked around. I was now sitting in a cave, alone. At least I hoped I was alone. There were 3 people still out there, and they were out there too. Well, everyone, I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. The story is still developing, and it gets quite interesting in the next bit, so I hope you'll join me tomorrow for the next part of the story. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button if you like this, and like I said, check back tomorrow. Anyways, thanks so much for listening.